Hello and welcome to BOT. Nidal, Lakshit, Suman, and Manthan meet here to talk about the bits of tech as it relates to digital transformation. Tune in and enjoy.
Here we go again, with an improved variation of our own backgrounds and darker colored clothes. We finally understood some nuances of doing a podcast. Um, Today, it is going to be about customer segmentation. It is a highly abusive term in the industry today, from my experience, wherein everybody is done talking about customer segmentation, but very few people, in my experience, and which is limited, but have gotten it right to a level where it is automated and it is doing all the right things. We can talk more about it, but if I were to give a few tidbit into what customer segmentation is all about, um, my first thought is that it's a very obvious definition, right? You have like a 1 million customers. If you were to know who these people are, a good way to start would be by bucketing them into certain business rules. Those business rules would be certain type of behaviors they exhibit, right? For example, people who like black color versus people who like blue color and others. I could segment my customers into these three categories, um, and give them a pop-up as well based on their choices, right? Or probably ensure that their experience is customized to their favorite color, right? Let's think of as a very simple use case where we want to ensure that the background color of the website or the theme of the web page gets changed based on the person's favorite color. It is a very simple thing to do, per se, but think of it as having 10 million customers in your database and doing it for 10 million people. That is where the complexity of data processing begins. That is where the challenges of customer segmentation start. We can dwell more into this example of, how would one ideally go about achieving that customized color. And I will wait for Lakshya to say the word personalized. uh, but yeah, that customized color catered to each person such that the website changes its theme based on who they know you are, right? For example, I, as a person, never preferred dark themes. There is dark theme on Windows, there's dark themes on Apple, on phone, there's dark theme options almost in all apps everywhere, but I just do not like it for the very simple reason that my eyes do not resonate with it. Like I don't, my productivity drops if you put me in a dark theme environment, right? If somebody knew that, if a website knew that, would it be able to make an impact on me as a customer by changing its theme automatically when I went there? That is a good thought process to understand where customer segmentation would begin. The idea being that this keeps changing from industry to industry, from vertical to vertical, and the rules are always changing from time to time. So what my customer segmentation needs were yesterday as an organization would completely change what it was today, could completely change, right? Or it could remain the same, or I need to go back to a previous version. All those things are a possibility. Before I speak more into what all this can do, I'll hand it over to you all to see what you'll think about customer segmentation is. I may not have covered it in the best possibility, so you all can probably start there by explaining what it is, and then we'll take it forward.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Manthan. Thanks for the lovely introduction. Uh, I mean, customer segmentation. While definitely we'll talk about more in the digital space and how it relates and what are the techniques, all the technology, how is it has transformed all the customer segmentation techniques and how it has brought more value to both the businesses and the customers. Uh, let's just understand what customer segmentation really means. I mean, customer segmentation itself is not a new technique, is not a new phenomena, it's not a new framework. It has always existed ever since the time businesses have begun. So for a business to flourish, it needs to understand who are its more profitable business, customers. The idea stems from the fact, who are my most valuable customers. The definition of value can differ from business to business, and that is what drives customer segmentation. That underlying fundamental need to understand and define value and attach value to a customer. that that trickle down, that segmentation or that bucketing of value is what defines customer segmentation. In earlier times, customer segmentation could be as simple as, rich, middle class, and poor. Sometimes it could be based on cities and demographics, that if a person is living in certain parts of the cities, they'll be more affluent and more likely to buy, versus somebody living in poor sections of the country are less likely to buy. So the brands would be different. Their approach would be different. The recall value would be different. What is the value that a brand brings to the customer uh, would be different. Going forward, as technology came into the picture, customer techniques, and as we collect more and more data, and as we discussed in our previous sections, that we are consuming close to, I don't know, terabytes of data in a year. uh, we can have billions, millions, or billions of customer data points about one single person, which means the power and complexity of it continues to increase. We can not only have demographic information about where they live, where they stay, what their age, gender is. We can have their psychographic information like their lifestyle, their taste and preferences. We can have more environmental information like what device they use, how much are they spending with certain brands. And then, of course, combining the power of first party, zero party, second party, and third party data, all of these new terminologies coming into the picture have uh, essentially uh, have essentially informed businesses of how they can clearly define value, how they can quantify what used to be a qualitative decision earlier as value, versus now can be a quantified decision on what value means to their business. And that value, when translated into certain techniques using certain tools, brings about higher personalization and higher value to the customer and the business through customer segmentation. Sorry for the cough, but I invite others to pitch in.
No problem. I think Lakshit, you're free to drink water uh, and just relax on the podcast. You don't have to be so serious about it. Uh, so my understanding of customer segmentation started back in when I was pursuing my bachelor's in statistics. We had a subject itself based on cluster analysis. So very simply, you're segmenting your rows based on, let's say, based on a Euclidean distance or a centroid method, based on a method which is suitable for the business problem that you're solving. From that point A, which was my starting point, till today, wherein I have almost 7 years of work experience, this is the most basic concept that is being used in almost every use cases we solve. So it has helped me, and what I am aiming to become is like unstoppable if I be the Sherlock Holmes of understanding customer behavior and patterns, right? Uh, I will be wanted everywhere, which is something that I want in the industry. So that aside, I can give a quick example, one being in supply chain. So obviously, segmentation is valid in B2B and B2C both. So B2C is obviously where we have a lot of ideas, right? If I'm selling a product, I would want to understand which segment of my customers are more likely to buy product A versus product B, what is the volume of product being sold, and etc. And then tailoring my marketing strategies and providing the right product offerings to my customer, right? That's the B2C, the general way of working. The other part, even though it's very difficult, if I may add, the other part of it is B2B, wherein let's say I'm selling laptops and I have N tiers or 30 tiers of distribution network in the way. And how do I deal with them? So again, while working with, let's say, 500 distributors, how will I segment my distributors so that I know that X amount of or X units of laptops will be sold in the next quarter, in the next year. So, and this example is valid across all the domains because I'm speaking about supply chain here, right? So these are a high level example of customer segmentation, how important and impactful it is to build these so that you're able to push the right offerings ahead. And also, obviously, um, if you'd like to be generous and let's say sometimes whatever offers that you come up with, promotions and all, you can do that. This being on the professional front, and I was also thinking, doesn't customer segmentation, not in the literal terms, happen in our families as well? We have some set of favorite cousins uh, with whom we would like to speak to, be it cousins, be it colleagues, like all four, all three of you are here right today, and we're together. Must be for a reason. Uh, we have set of favorite friends, or probably we would have categorized it. So I think it's a very basic concept. Um, and I love studying my data before we build any marketing strategies or run any algorithms. This is, after EDA, segmentation would be one of the key methods that we use to understand our data better. So let me know what you all think and the use cases that you all have solved.
Yeah, I mean, if we were to take a step back, right? Of course, like the data aspect of it is a given, and then you segment based on some attributes that is there. But like, when did customer segmentation essentially become so important that um, that's where you start? Um, like all organizations today would have at least one program called customer segmentation. Like all organizations who does analytics in one or the other way would have a specific program called customer segmentation, and ideally a person or a BU or a business unit head responsible for segmentation only, right? um, what I think is, when did it become so important that now there is an entire business unit just for customer segmentation, right? Just to get that bit right. um, and I'll answer this with a real life example that I faced. All right. Let's take a traditional organization. A traditional organization, these modern times are different, where organizations have flat hierarchy, and and horizontally spread responsibilities. But a traditional big conglomerate would always have vertically aligned business units. Those vertically aligned business units have their own individual KPIs rolling up to the organizational KPIs, right? This is the standard structure of any conglomerate that we can think of today. Um, as an example, marketing and sales, right? The salesperson has their KPIs for, very simply thinking, increasing sales, right? The number. The marketing person has their KPIs for increasing the reach. Let's understand that these are the two primary KPIs in consideration in my example for now. The way the marketer segments the data or would want to reach out to me as their customer versus the way the salesperson would segment that data and reach out to me as a customer could be very different. The marketer could end up segmenting me based on my behavior, right? Based on my past behavior, or any other data points that Lakshit and Suman both mentioned in one or the other way, um, that the marketer could do. The salesperson, though, could simply look at how much lifetime value I've had with the said company, right? Or how much purchase have I made in the last 3 months or 6 months, based on what they are trying to sell to me next. They could look at just that one metric, bucket people into um, segments based on revenue, and start reaching out there. Now think of the outcome of this experience. The marketer is sending me an email saying that, hey, you know what? If you add this service to your product, you will benefit. The salesperson is telling me, if you upgrade this product, you will benefit. This is the end outcome of having two different teams deciding what the customer segments should be. In my understanding, and this is out of the real life scenario that I faced in my past working life, in my understanding, this is why there came a need of having one customer segmentation lead, one person who's deciding it all based on the agreed upon business rules, where all teams were taken had given their consent. So the marketer said that, hey, these should be the business rules. The salesperson said that, hey, these should be the business rules. then it's the job of the person who's leading the segmentation to define the business rules such that everybody's conditions or most conditions are justified based on the business, and then start segmenting customers so that at least across the organization everybody is thinking of me in this example as the same customer and as not as different customer. One simple example is, if you are a HNI, which is a commonly termed use, if you're a high network individual in a banking industry, you are a high network individual for all their products. It's not like the credit card unit would not think of me as HNI versus the savings line of business would think of me as HNI. That's not how it would be, right? That's where I think the need of segmentation came in. Open to hearing what you'll have to say.
Yeah, I think one great point that resonated with me was, you talked about how this is applicable to maybe a brand which has, a B2C sort of business. But from a B2B point of view, I think Suman also shared a few examples about B2B versus B2C. From a B2B standpoint, all of my experience has been with agencies, right? And agencies typically function B2B. You have clients, and this is one of the techniques that large agencies use to also segment clients. So it's not just end consumers, right? You talked about HNI, and that's like an individual metric. But you also look at, when you look at B2B companies, segmentation is done on the basis of revenue, years of relationship with that particular client, or several other factors, right? The way of doing business with them, and that's critical. That is, I've seen in the different agencies that I've worked with, I've seen initiatives specifically to do that segmentation and to have a different approach for each of those segments, right? Because you cannot have a one size fits all solution for any of the different segments. Some segments require more attention, some don't, because those are minimal effort. You don't need to, probably they are not whale clients, right? Maybe they are like smaller clients. So that's one aspect of it that I can think of from like an agency, agency life. I've purely been on the agency side. So the other thing I can think of is, we've talked about B2B versus B2C. Think about, small and medium-sized businesses, right? Or think about home-based businesses. A lot of, this is the age where, social media is being used. So many influencers, there's so many homegrown businesses that's like literally thriving on platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc., to build their home-based businesses. So a lot of these businesses, or even influencers for that matter, really thrive on specific segments, and that's very, very defined segments, right? Of audiences, right? And that's what you would call a niche, which is, sometimes the niche can be super, super specific to the very last level of detail, that, you're really thriving on that, and you find people. Now, in a digital world, you don't have boundaries. You're not limited by people who are within your, you can provide services online. So you have to just find out people from your niche. And that's just a way of operating, or the way of working for a lot of small and medium businesses, and also for all of these homegrown, home-based businesses, right? So I've always felt that that customer segmentation is like at the fundamental part of it, right? If you haven't figured that out, there's a chance that you started doing your business in some areas, and then you slowly started shifting to other areas, depending on, okay, what you have realized, what your expectations were of the market versus what you have actually realized, or what you're seeing the response from, right? You're starting to see certain groups of people expressing interest in your product or service more. So then you look for those groups of people, right? And now you have, when you're advertising, you definitely have ways to segment and do targeted, pinpointed advertising, right? I think Suman specifically talked about the tailoring aspect of it, right? Yeah, you can like tailor things to a specific segment's need. Yeah.
Thanks, Adal. Thanks for that. I'd like to offer a new perspective here. Not a new, but maybe a different perspective here. Uh, Customer segmentation, just like businesses, is also an evolving idea and also depends on what stage of the business you are in. Whether you're a nascent, if you're a very nascent business, like you're a startup, you don't really have enough data with yourself or any of your customer where you can actually do any kind of segmentation. You're not really looking for segmentation. Segmentation for a startup is not even a priority to begin with. For them, it's all about growth, penetration, reaching the TAM. So for them, segmentation is more extrinsic because they're trying to push their brand. So push versus pull strategy is also something that would define how they would go about the segmentation criteria. So for them, segmentation uh, is not intrinsic, more extrinsic. They would try and get what are my competitors, who are my competitors segments, what industry am I in, what is my age group, what cities or target, what cities or states can I target, what's my catchment area that I can look into. Uh, so those kind of scenarios would depend. If you're a large business, you have, if I'm, let's say if I'm talking somebody like HUL, who's an umbrella brand, they have millions and millions of customers. For them, uh, customer segmentation becomes a more complex challenge, because now they don't not only have to do branding, like they don't just have to do segmentation and marketing campaigns for the purpose of ensuring that the brand recall continues to increase, but because of the increase in population, new people getting people getting new people getting added to their respective segments every day, they have to ensure that there's some degree of growth as well. So they have to invest in brand campaigns, they have to invest in performance campaigns, while ensuring that their own uh, children brands also do not get cannibalized. So some of the biggest challenges that also Manthan in fact allude to, that there should be a single definition across the board, is very very tough to achieve, because we come across so many use cases where there are marketers, sales folks trying end up uh, communicating different messages to the same people, which ends up actually cannibalizing your own marketing campaign. So you'll find that people also might, because of travel, people are also traveling from one place to another, because we have made so much hyper personalized campaigns that a person in Delhi would see a different message versus a person in Mumbai for the same brand. If a person is traveling, you might end up showing them two different campaigns just because of the demographic. uh, so that also is a wrench in the whole system. So while personalization is definitely good, we have to take into account that we don't over index on personalization, and while compromising on the stage and priority of the business. uh, Put simply, if I was to just summarize it in one statement, I would say my definition of customer segmentation would be, it's a technique or a tool that allows businesses to identify what value means to them at their stage of life cycle, while ensuring customer delight. Meaning, customer segmentation shouldn't just be a value to the business, it should also ensure that we are delighting our customers, we are providing them with the best experience possible, whether through personalization or categorization or templatization, even to some extent. So sometimes customer segmentation also ensures templatization. That is, we need to ensure that we provide same degree of certain features to all my customers, while ensure which we call as points of parity with my competitors. That is, if my competitor says that all our products must be tasty, or if I'm in a food industry, so my product must be tasty, simple, but it should have a little bit of masala in it. So that's my point of differentiation that I will drive for certain sections of my business, so that I ensure that I create valuable customers, while also ensuring that there's a loyalty index that I can be associated with all my customers across the board. For the further techniques of how we can do it, it could be RFM analysis, clustering, predictive algorithm. Uh, Now, even more AI based models are coming into the picture for hyper and local personalization and hyper local personalization. But I leave it to someone to talk more about the techniques of segmentation. But just wanted to throw some perspective on the association of, or how business, industry, customers all stitched together in this customer segmentation journey. Thank you.
Sure. So thank you. I think I got a masala point from you, Lakshan, and I'll come to that. So Manthan, you mentioned about businesses having a vertical, a unit itself for customer segmentation, right? And I was pondering about it. The reason would be availability of data that we have today. If I think of even 50 years ago or 70 years ago, I don't think as much data was available at disposal for doing any sort of analysis, correct? So that could be the reason and it could work on both the ways. One is obviously product offerings and marketing strategies. The other being, even though you're a startup, you would do good amount of research and would want to understand the kind of audiences you would market your product to. You could have a high-priced hair oil or a low-priced hair oil, right? So your use case could differ, and right then and there, you're doing the segmentation with respect to your audience, correct? So, and that's what I was intrigued. Thinking about MDH masalas, I'm sure each one of us would have it at a home, correct? When I was reading earlier about the founder's story, I don't think at that time they were barely managing to do some kind of business, and then from one location they scale to multiple location, and today nationally in most of the places MDH masala would be available in India. So today they would be at a liberty of doing good level of customer segmentation. At that time, because of less available data, they would be doing it based on their experiences with their local customers and the business logic, which would be relevant then, correct? I can speak about two use cases, as I mentioned about B2B and B2C earlier. Let's take an example in the automotive industry for a B2C use case, right? So Lakshit, let's say your favorite car is BMW. I'm saying that because it's mine. Okay. And if you were to research about the features, anything that you want about the class of BMW you're planning to buy, because I know you're rich. So you go to the website or you go to a showroom and you try to see which particular car are you looking at. Considering, were you saying something? Considering how much I know you as a person, I'm sure you will buy one of the top classes of BMW, but BMW will already have an enriched customer data profiles with them. And with your unique data points, they will be able to map you in one of the categories and recommend the right product to you, right? In this case, it's a car. That's phase one. The phase two of it would be how important is Lakshit as a client to us, correct? Is it that you're just doing window shopping? I mean, you can always walk into any showroom and just try to see their products, right? Or are you really serious? So what sort of priority are you as a customer for them to invest their time and energy? So these two would be an example in the automotive industry for B2C as a use case. We can look at the agriculture domain, okay, for a B2B example. So let's say that any company, let's say Manthan is growing a crop and he is selling it to some 10,000 farmers. So there will be like a company who is signed up. So if Manthan is signed up with 10,000 farmers, how would you segment those farmers? It would be on the basis of the yield they're providing to the company and on the basis of the quality of the crop that they're providing to the company, right? So when we think about segmentation, we usually think in the marketing domain, right? And marketing is not only subject to the digital marketing, it is, or your e-commerce per se. It is applicable even in agriculture on a very large extent. And that's where, when you know that, okay, my group of A suppliers, which is my best suppliers, are able to give me the best quality and the best yield, let me have XYZ incentives for them. So that's where you are strengthening the relationship with your suppliers. So let me know what you think. It's really fun when we go through such use cases and work on those use cases and understand the challenges of those industries and try to understand the business first and then doing any sort of analysis, which in this case would be a customer segmentation. It's a lot to learn, and I feel that as much as I learn, I realize that there's many more things to learn.
Yeah, I mean, great examples, Suman. I'll add on top of your examples and make it a little bit generic, for the larger good. Think of the biggest use case that exists today in our lives or has always existed, which can be which is very much alike to customer segmentation. It is the census, right? All countries, um, yearly or on a regular basis, produce a census report, right? That census tells you how much population it is there as of that given date. That's one of the data points. Within that census, and I'm assuming I've never read a census report, uh, but let's assume for a minute that that census also tells you who are the people, like what is the percentage of youth in your country versus children versus aged people, right? Usually these are the categories. There can always be more. Um, they try to bifurcate this. They, as in the government or the person or the party responsible for producing the census, um, they will differentiate with these factors. Why would they do it? They do it because they need to know how many people, for example, will end up becoming pensioners, right? Or how many people will end up becoming the beneficiaries of some government schemes which are eligible for only 65 plus years people or people who are 18 or younger, right? So why I've taken this as an example is because it has a lot of convoluted layers to it. The first convoluted layer is that by the time you are done counting, that data has already changed. Um, let's just assume that there is going to be 5% of error rate into this, right? That's okay. 5% error rate or whatever you want to call it, but basically 5% of having not the right data is allowed. Let's say it is 10% in the case of census. That's also okay. Even with that 90%, there are a lot many things that are moving, right? There could be more people who are born. There could be more people who have passed away. Um, there could be people who have left the country, right? Who are no longer your citizens. There are so many data points. I'm just bringing up a few, but my point being that this use case itself tells you that there is no perfect way of doing segmentation, right? You still start somewhere. And as I'm saying all this, try to think of this as an analogy for any organization that you can resonate with. It could be an e-commerce or an automotive website or anything that you can think of, right? It could be a completely offline store, and this would still be applicable. By the time you know who these people are and you've started to segment them, that boat has pretty much sailed. So now what you're trying to bank on is that, okay, with this accuracy, let's say it is 60% or 80%, how much can I do, right? And then you try your best to build business rules around it and put your customers into those buckets. Guess what? By the time you're done doing that project, right, even those business rules could have become stale, right? Some of those business rules may not be applicable any longer, right? For example, a policy change. A policy is changed that the X benefit that was being given to people who are 65 years or older is no longer being given or has converted into Y, right? These business rules also keep changing. That is also the reason why customer segmentation ends up becoming a challenge, right? Um, so you can think of many more challenges like these, but what does it lead to? It leads to people being stuck with not enough evidence that the customer segmentation that exists today in their given database is right. What does this lead to? It leads to uh, it leads to people saying that it is because of this data that our X KPIs were not met, right? It could lead to it. Uh, and then the whole block comes down falling, in my understanding. This is where the buck stops. Why? Because in the first place, as I was saying, it is nobody's KPI to do customer segmentation. The salespeople are busy doing sales. The marketing people are busy doing marketing, right? So on and so forth. The manufacturing folks are busy doing manufacturing. Customer segmentation is nobody's KPI per se. It is a horizontal layer that has been put on top of your organization hierarchy to augment these functions. And when I say the word augment, it basically means that it will aid into it. It may or may not directly contribute to it. That is where I think the biggest challenge is in terms of getting customer segmentation right. Like by the time I'm done speaking these things, I'm sure my own thought process has changed enough that if I were to say this example again, I'd say it with different business rules in mind, right? So that's the irony of it. One solution for this irony is that the customer segmentation function gets the authority and gets enough funding in an organization to be able to make these decisions using technology, to be able to ensure that it is everybody's KPI such that it is being updated, right? And that it becomes a core business function. Like I would not be surprised if in the future we have positions like chief customer segmentation officer, right? It is a C-suite level position in my understanding to be able to do these things, right? Not from a position standpoint, but from a business function standpoint. This is where my thought process is at. I think I spoke a lot. I covered a spectrum. You can tell me if you want to break down on it or say something else.
Yeah. Thanks, Vandhan. I do want to highlight on top of that that well, you're right. There's no particular position called as Chief Customer Segmentation Officer, but yes, there are roles and functions where customer segmentation is in fact a KPI, and it starts in a lot of. And I'm seeing that shift in culture today because of a lot of startups and tech startups specifically coming into the foray, who are collecting plethora of data right from day zero. Uh, so these customer segmentation information are trickling down from leadership positions, wherein they define broad customer segments for the business. And these will be, like I said, value and customer delight being the two keywords. That these will be our net high level categorized valuable customers. Yes, when that broad category of customer segmentation continues to trickle down to respective functions, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, whether it's the product team, now that a product team is a separate function, uh, those definitions get tweaked a little because the product team is more focused on retention, customer engagement, their usage, keeping the person on the platform for longer as compared to the competitor. Uh, a marketing a person is more interested in growth, for example, growth and profitability, bringing more people to our source of truth. That source of truth could be my website, could be my store for offline sales, but my source of truth. Whereas sales tries, once a person is inside it, their behavioral engagement with my features, products, how many times have they come in, how many times have they engaged with my brand across multiple touch points. Take these insights both from the marketing and the product team and the operations and other teams, let's say, and build this into a empathetic story for them so that they are in their final stage of consideration choose us and not our competitor. So that is how these customer segmentations get seamlessly built and weaved into a story function. It goes from CEO, let's say, to product to marketing to then finally sales. And this is how we can generally also define the sales funnel, as we call it, wherein we try and define the awareness stages, the consideration stages, and then the final purchase funnels and post purchase behavior as well. So we have our support and customer delight teams as we are customer success teams. So the story doesn't end at purchase, is what I'm trying to say. It goes beyond that in order to build customer loyalty. So customer segmentation goes just beyond purchase. Once a purchase has been made, it's also important to ensure that to maintain a customer advocacy and loyalty, that we continue to serve them post that sale, and that's where our customer success teams will also come into the picture. Having said that, uh, I also wanted to talk about a framework that was actually taught to pretty much all of us in our first job. And a shout out to Sundar. Suman has already was also might be aware of Sundar. He taught us a very beautiful framework that I've carried on till today. It's called the SIPOC framework: source, input, process, output, and consumption layer. In my head, I always remember that input, process, and output, and then maybe a feedback layer. Uh, but he beautifully explained that SIPOC layer. And so, like, how would you go about doing customer segmentation? So, customer segmentation is not an isolated function. It's a process within the entire storyline of collection of data, processing of it, and then activation on those segmentation. So customer and segmentation, as part of the insights that you have collected, you also need to activate upon it to ensure that you get the reap, you're able to reap the benefits of this. So source would typically be defined as online and offline channels, which then could address, as Manthan said, the latency in the data issues. Can you get real-time data? The most real-time data would come from your online channels, and mostly from your own personally owned inventory, such as your own app or your own website. Typically, there are other online channels and affiliate channels as well. But combining your online and offline, and with the maximum latency being on the offline channel, offline intelligence is generally combined into your online signals. That is where the input stage comes in. You collect all the data, define tables, define a key. The key is very critical, which is called as user ID, because your user ID for your offline, online affiliate channel would be very different. And so you need to ensure that you bring in a system that allows you to identify the same customer across all your online and offline channels. Once you've done that, you go into processing, which is our customer segmentation. Typically, is this customer, how recent was this customer, how many times have they purchased with us, what was their monetary value, do we think that now that this person has done so many interactions with us, what is the likely amount of product are they willing to purchase from us, would they continue to purchase from us once they bought with us once. That's the processing stage. Once you've done that, we go into the output stage, wherein we then activate these audiences. We create these audiences and segmentation. We activate them across channels, which Nidal was mentioning. We activate them across our social media platforms. We want to reach out to them directly, so we also give them to our BDRs, business development representatives. That hey, reach out to them directly, call them, email them. That's where our marketing teams also come in. We also try and target them across our own website, where we bring about more hyper personalization techniques using various A/B testing and multivariate testing tools. We also personalize the experience on our ad campaigns and inventories, which could be also out of the home and ad inventories, or could be our online channels across Google, Meta, and other places. So we choose those channels, and once that has been done, that's really a consumption layer comes in. So we create assets accordingly. So once we have that output, it depends on how the SIPOC C is how the customers consume it. Which channels are the most profitable? Am I getting more traction from my social media channels? If yes, then my market media mix model should be such that I spend more on social. Am I getting more organic users on my website? Then let's focus more on our content. uh, is this a new market for me? If this is a new market for me, then yes, I'm getting more traction on my paid channels. So yes, I think I might have to burn some money. I may not be profitable for a bit, but let me burn that. Let me get some market share and share of voice before I turn profitable. All of these decisions can be driven by customer segmentation and the value that the business is getting from each of these customers. And this entire storyline can be weaved through that SIPOC framework that we just talked about. And again, shout out to Sundar Balakrishnan for teaching us that. And with that, this is my parting thought on how you can ensure that your customer segmentation is a part of the process and not a isolated function.
Great examples. Have to love how you literally like drew a flow chart, like, virtual flow chart for all of us here. And I think, the example which Suman used about like Lakshit buying a BMW, I think that also sort of painted pictures. So I love all the examples. I think Manthan referred to a point about, the challenges with customer segmentation, how those conditions can be outdated, right? I'd like to talk about a slightly different type of challenge there. Now, one recent trend that you can see with segmentation is dynamic segmentation, right? Which means that you're not relying on static segment definitions. That's where the models come in. You can use modeling to ensure that the variability in terms of every single consumer will behave differently, right? You have real-time data getting captured, you have different other data points getting captured about end users, and that sort of factors into your segmentation. So that's where dynamic segmentation comes into the picture, and then the rules that you've already defined, do not stay static anymore. The other interesting point I can think of is, in a way, it's also dependent on, all of us work with data a lot. It also depends on how well we are collecting data. So think about your web analytics tools, such as, your Adobe Analytics or Google Analytics, and all of us have done segmentation exercises where you're like creating segments based on certain data points that have been captured. At the end of the day, it is also a matter of how accurately those data points have been collected, right? Now, an end business user may not necessarily know that. They may not know which is the right variable, which is the right way to set it up. I mean, now we are talking specifically about like that digital analytics data and analyzing that data. But when you look at that example, and this could apply to other realms also, but when you look at that example, you need that solid foundation of data. You need that solid understanding of data. Otherwise, the segments that have been built by somebody else may not be the segments that you might want to reuse just because the logic is the same, right? You would assume the logic is the same, but really it might not be. So that's where understanding the data points, making sure the data is collected accurately, and also having the instructions or the data dictionaries, or also the consistency of that data across different assets or different different websites that are part of your business. That is also important, right? If you have a global business, the logic you might be using for customer segmentation, for segmenting customers in India, might be different to how you do it in a different market or a different area where you're doing business. And that is where a lot of localized rules, localized versions of segmenting come into the picture. But that may not be necessary if you are able to like have a global initiative, right? It also talks about, we talked about at which stage of your business does it make sense to invest so much into it to get the right returns out of it. And we also talked about how much importance this needs to be given. Does it need to have a dedicated team, right? It's nobody's KPI. So all of this come into the picture, right? With more and more organizations relying on data, we are seeing a shift for sure, where customer segmentation initiatives are getting more limelight than before, for sure. But again, then we need to also be mindful of these sort of pitfalls, right? As all of us, I'm sure, and people who are listening in their own respective roles will have a role to play.
Of course, great point, Siddharth. You almost stole like three thoughts there. So there's a lot of telepathy happening here, but
Great minds, great minds.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was about to mention this, right? At the end of the day, like the challenges that we are talking about that exist in the customer segmentation world can only be solved with right sort of data. Let's say that there are two definitions that exist in an organization. One side of the organization is saying that, hey, customer segmentation needs to be based on revenue, right? Bucket people based on the revenue brackets, and um, customize your messages and or your reach or your offering according to that. The other house of the organization is saying do everything based on the existing behavioral data points. A customer may have generated $1 million worth of revenue in this year, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will buy more unless you knew what they are doing otherwise, right? With their behavior on the current website, our own website, or some other websites, right? Whatever data points you have. So the data mesh, to what Nidal was rightly mentioning, would highly determine which of this turns out to be true, right? There are tools today which are available for A/B testing, right? Um, Even though this is like a very long process to get to the end output of let's personalize or hyper personalize, but what happens is um, you could still use your A/B tests to be able to say that this method works more for our line of business or our organization versus this method, right? There can be more than one customer segmentation methodologies in the start, with enough data analysis, and it doesn't have to be client facing experiments, it can be using data science as well. With enough data analysis, one can prove that a given methodology makes more sense than the other one. That's one way to get to the end result, right? And the other is simply by running live programs and seeing what the impact is. um, the other aspect that I thought would be important is how to get there, right? Because the owners of the data, who people who are responsible for collecting this data, are very different than people who are responsible for doing customer segmentation, right? And then again, as I was saying, it goes back to the marketers and people who are actually going to use that data. That's the third layer. So connecting these, and forming a connectedness within the organization, enough passion for the project such that everybody is thinking the same when it comes to data. um, that is super important. And Nidal, I'm like in complete agreement with the fact that it can be solved with data, not with arguments or anything like that. In cases like these, I think it is super important to have a function like data science, um, which will give you enough scientific proof, right, for it. The other aspect is that there are projects like lifetime value, um, among others, which can very well be dependent uh, on how good your customer segmentation strategy is. For example, if my customer segmentation did not conform to my current customer behavior, right? Um, my lifetime value in a given bucket could look very different versus in a different bucket, right? So those things, I could easily say that people who are generating more revenue are highly likely to come back on the website in a year versus people who are generating low revenue would come less often on the website. This sort of analysis can be contradicted with just changing the customer segmentation rule, and suddenly the behavioral data points would become different, right? That is why getting customer segmentation right is so important, that all your other analytics projects and or data points that you produce for customers will will be dependent on these customer segmentation buckets. Because maybe this quarter my goal is to only enrich my customers who belong to the mid bucket, for example, right? And that mid bucket definition will determine the success of it. Maybe mid bucket people are not interested at all, and I'm too busy showing my ads to them and burning millions behind them, wherein the ideal market was at the lower bucket. This is where this is a very vague example of how customer segmentation could make or break the game. Um, that's where I'd like to wrap this up, so to speak, to say that as Lakshit was saying, the model that he mentioned, if you were to take it very simply, it's input process output, right? Get your input right, define a strong process to get the right output. That's the sum all of what we just spoke about in terms of customer segmentation. I'll hear from you all if you wanted to say some things before we call it a day today.
Yes, I just have 3 points, 3 quick points to make before we wrap up. Number one, so Lakshit, you mentioned about having the right key in multiple data sources so that we're able to stitch the data well, right? So, having worked on tools, I can tell you that if you would have worked on Adobe Customer Journey Analytics, it is a very powerful tool for doing segmentation and building the right audience, because through the multiple data sets, you will have a single unique primary key which will stitch your data together. And now, irrespective of your data being online or offline, you're doing wonder, because obviously after the cleansing and transformation, there's a lot that can be done. The second point being that, Manthan, you mentioned about the lifetime value analysis. Along with that, churn analysis has been happening since a very long time. And one of the strong analysis that the businesses do to understand in which particular segment, how likely a customer is to churn, right? So a lot of models, traditionally logistic regression was used, but obviously we have a lot of models to solve that problem. So considering each segment and using the right type of techniques and algorithm, we will be able to make informed decisions. The third point being, I just love use cases because I just love solving them and being submerged in them altogether. I would like to just end it with a use case that there was a report published by a survey being done in the US as recent as 2023, wherein almost 30%, a company was facing 30% returns from their online apparel brand. If you think about it, it's a business problem that we're trying to solve, right? One is obviously you want to do penetration, you want to do the right promotion strategies, product offerings, etc., etc. But the other thing is the other side of it, correct? If you are getting high return rates, how would you solve that? So A, you're doing customer segmentation for hyper personalization, but B, what will you do when you're getting high volume of returns? And it's billions of dollars have been spent, so it's $1 billion in question when we think of it from a business perspective. So to sum this up, I would like to say that it's very, very important to understand the business in whatever depth we can, and then try to, along with the business leads and the heads that we have, and they will have XYZ strategies of how we would like to do the segmentation. We can also come up with our own ideas around it, considering that we will have experience solving different use cases as well, right? So let's solve a lot of problems and save a lot of money for the business.
Thanks, Suman. Great conversation, guys, and really agree with the most of your points that you mentioned. I'll just like to leave a parting thought here that many researches have been done in this field of customer segmentation, and just two points. I mean, there are several points, but two points that actually caught my attention was that businesses that do good segmentation earn 10% profitably on profit 10% more profitable than the other businesses on average, while reducing their customer acquisition cost by 50%. So there's a myth out there that if you do heavy customer segmentation, and because of all the channels involved, all the techniques involved, it will increase your cost. I mean, maybe the fixed cost as a one-time setup cost, maybe, but in the long run, it will definitely reduce your cost. It will reduce your bottom line while ensuring that your top line continues to grow and your business continues to thrive and scale at the speed that you desire. So definitely recommended segmentation. Smart segmentation is one that allows, like I said, brings delight to your customer while ensuring value to your business. That's from my side.
This
Thank you.
so great, Lakshit. I wish you'd brought it up earlier. In the crunch of time, we'll have to, wrap this up. But I have so many things to say to that. Great thoughts, guys. Maybe we'll have a version 2 of customer segmentation eventually, right? Where we can talk more. At this point of time, the segment where we are falling on YouTube in terms of shares, likes, and subscribes is getting us a good start, but we hope to do better in there. So if you wish to put us in a better segment, please do engage and let us know what you think. All your comments are very well welcome. It can be contradictory, it can be for. We will love it all. Thank you, everyone. You'll have a great time. Bye bye.